Welcome to Wake Up with Giants. Have you wondered and dove into, is that a word, dived into what it takes to have the good life in recovery? We're going to go over that. Hang tight because you're not going to want to miss this episode. Man, welcome to Wake Up with Giants. We're so glad to have you guys here. We've got a special guest today, but before we jump into that, some housekeeping items. I feel like I'm back at the school. If you need to say something, raise your hand. No, the beauty is like we bring comments on board so that we can discuss those as well as we go through, and we'll highlight different things that you say tomorrow as we go through the conversation. But it's really going to be a fun dialogue. If you haven't subscribed to YouTube yet on our channel, we update shows nearly daily. And there's great information. We have the radio show. We have the Wake Up with Giants TV. We have tips and tricks on becoming a giant. And then sometimes we'll just post some random thing because we don't know what else to do, but we're trying to get you information. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Share this with friends and family. Join us in the tribe of giants. We have a global community of people making a difference, and we're on a vision and mission to impact 100 million lives globally. And so, Melissa, would you mind introducing our guest?
I would love to. This is Tamar Medford, and Tamar is the founder of The Road Forward and host of the Road Beyond Recovery podcast, where she draws from her experience of almost a decade of working with others in recovery. Tamar is a performance consultant, life coach, best-selling author, and supporter for entrepreneurs in recovery. I absolutely love that, and I can't wait to dive into all of that with Tamar. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here, guys.
I was going to say, I love your intro and your bio. I'm going to write one to mirror that because mine's not good enough. I know I can see I've got to go back.
I've written about 10 of them. So
yeah. And also, I think I'm going to go try and get on with the Blue Man Group. My lighting makes me look blue, it feels like, in here. So
a little bit.
Welcome to the show. Let's dive into you. Let's go into your story because you have a journey that I think is really going to serve people. And I want to start, usually we start at where you started. I think it's different for everybody. We all have a different start point. And usually we start in childhood with the show, but really your awakening is some other point along there. But can you tell us about childhood? What was life like growing up for you?
Absolutely. And I like that you asked that question because when it comes to addiction, a lot of people think that you have to have a traumatic upbringing to fall into that. Like something terrible has had to happen. And unfortunately, that's the reality of many people who fall into addiction. But for me, I had an amazing upbringing. I was born in Holland. Okay. So we're European. So drinking was not taboo or anything. You could drink at a very young age in Holland. But we immigrated to Canada and my dad really wanted to follow his dream. And so he was a baker to start. Wanted to be a video producer. And I think that's where I got a lot of my work ethic and passion for doing what I love today. But we moved around a lot as kids, right? When he decided to become a video producer, we kind of moved every couple of years. So I was going to new schools, having to make new friends. And I think that's where my shyness started. And, having to go to that new school and meet people all over again, I kind of became almost introverted and it became a challenge. I never felt like I fit in much, but my parents always encouraged me. My parents were very loving. They always told me they loved me. But my dad was very, and I thank him now for it. He's one of my heroes today, but he always pushed me. If I did okay, he'd be like, you can do better. And I would always try to get that gold star. That's where my feeling of needing external recognition came from. And always pushing myself hard, always being hard on myself. But, for the most part, my upbringing was amazing.
So really, like somebody would look at it and say, there's no way that Tamar would ever go down a path of addiction, right?
Yeah.
Because your dad really pushed you, but he loved you. Your mom supported you and loved you. So what I'm hearing, though, is that there's this newness in this school that started to create these uncomfortable feelings, and you didn't know how to deal with it. Is that right?
Absolutely. I had an inability to handle my emotions because I was always seeking that love from external sources rather than learning to love myself and be happy with what I was doing and who I was.
Yeah. So what led you down the road to addiction? So did that lead into that, or is there more in between that we need to talk about?
No, it actually, that led into it. My insecurity, going into high school, wanting to be liked, wanting to be part of the cool crowd.
Right.
And I didn't really have a crowd, but I remember when I was 14, I got drunk for the first time. And it's like my world went from black and white to color. All of a sudden, I felt like I had come to, like, I'm confident, I'm funny. At least I thought I was funny. We talked about that a little before the show, but all of a sudden I had this confidence within me that I could do anything and I was invincible. And I really fell in love at that point, right? I found my solution for everything. I found my way that I could numb out those emotions that I battled with so badly. I didn't care, if people liked me or not. I just thought, well, they naturally do now because I'm the party person. I'm, the life of the party kind of thing. But the problem with me was that because addiction ran in my family, not, my parents didn't suffer from it, but my dad's side of the family, it was something that happened, right? Anything that gave me anything that was mind altering, I wasn't afraid to put in my body. And so I actually started taking more, lighter drugs as a teenager, and I would try anything.
Man. And so there's a point where you love that thing. Like that thing opens up your world and it's colorful. And so it didn't start out with anything like it really opened you up, if somebody's hearing this, to experience life in a way that you hadn't experienced it. And so in that, you started to now depend on that. Is that right?
I did. After I graduated, which was barely, my English teacher slapped my final exam down, just to give you an idea of what I was like in high school at this point, going from a shy person to her going, if you fail this exam and you're in my class again next year, I will make your life a living hell.
Wow,
so
yeah.
I think I passed by 2%, but all my friends were going to college and university, and then they were getting into relationships. And I had actually played sports. My dad was my soccer coach for years, and I had got asked to be on a provincial soccer team. And I was too hungover to go to the tryouts. Like they said, you can be our starting goaltender. And so that was kind of the start of the darker periods in my life. And I actually fell into harder drugs at the age of 25 because my obsession to numb my emotions and keep them that way, it progressed, right?
Yeah.
And, I've learned now that humans become addicted to anything that gives them pleasure.
Yeah, let's go down that path. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that can look like, if I were to ... that, right? That could look like what
Monster
would come up.
energy.
Yeah. Right. Coffee, reading books, diving into books, Facebook swiping, social media, work. I mean, it could look like anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so here's where
we have some of those issues.
Yeah, we are. I'm sitting here going,
for sure.
Yep, addicted to work. Yep.
Yeah. And then as a society, we're like, hey, it's cool, man. We all do it. And then there's certain things that we're like, that's not cool, man. Don't do that. But the reality is the addiction is the same. And even if it's socially acceptable, it's this numbing from the discomfort. And what I'm hearing in your journey is that you go down this path and you find this thing that just lights your world up. And then you become dependent on that. And then you start to get hungover and you start making choices that feel even heavier than before. And so you go back to your old friend. I think of Johnny Cash's song. Yeah, the needle in the arm or whatever that he talks about, when he's addicted to drugs and the dirt. I can't picture the words, but I know this song, And it's like he's the familiar pain of that, right? And you go back to your old friend that used to support you and make life colorful, and now that friend makes you even darker. And you go down and down and down. And even with work or energy drinks or anything else, it can be the same process. It's like that thing that used to serve you now is your master in a way, right?
Absolutely. And it's painful. I think you know, when I talk to people who have family members that suffer from addiction, it's they want to help them, they want to save them, but you really can't. Like it's that person has to want to come out of that, and it's really difficult. They don't mean to be who they are,
Yeah.
but the substance is so powerful, right? It's when people
Right.
with eating disorders as well. I mean, food's a big thing for me. You give me a bowl of ice cream and I'm going to eat the whole tub, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. It's that inability to handle my emotions.
Yeah. And so that's where people start to numb out.
Yeah.
Right. I'm wondering for Ryan and Melissa, what comes up as you hear that?
I was just going to say, I can't even believe how unbelievably this just hit me right now, because
Yeah.
I might cry.
Huh.
I literally just realized that I do that with work, and I have had so many people come into my life and say, I'm going to make you step back and I'm going to make you slow down. And they don't, because I don't want to. It totally just hit me so hard right now. It's a full-on addiction.
When was the last time we had an intervention around somebody's work? When was the last time we had an intervention about somebody drinking coffee? When was the last time we had an intervention about somebody that just reads books all day or goes to self-help seminars? Like I'm guilty. I have a library of over 300 books in my Audible. That's my addiction, right? When things get hard and I want to numb out, what do? I listen to an audiobook. Somebody on the outside might say, well, that's a healthy addiction. Okay, but I'm avoiding the feeling. Yep. So is it? Right? Where's my somebody? Yeah, let's intervene. Let's put me in rehab because I'm addicted to audiobooks, right? But we don't do that. Like we put it in a different category. Oh, that's a healthy addiction, right?
Yeah.
But is it? Yeah.
It's unbelievable though, and I think that's the really cool part about today is a lot of people are trying to bring more awareness to mental health, right?
Yeah.
Depression. I mean, I suffer from depression. I've been medicated for it before. I've now just learned, I've taken what I've learned in recovery and actually implemented that in every other area of my life. And I've learned to feel what I'm going through and deal with things as they come up and actually own the part I play in everything, because we have all these expectations of what we should do or what others should do around us, and we let it consume us and it can ruin our lives.
Right. So
and why don't we go there? We don't go there because it sucks. It feels crappy to be there in your emotions and feeling it, right? Ryan's laughing because I actually said that on air, but it feels crappy to be in that spot. That's why we don't go there. That's why we move to something.
Well,
that's why.
Yeah, I want to hit on that, Melissa, because we don't want to feel that. And I think of mothers who've given birth to children, which to me is probably the most painful experience that anybody could go through. And they would rather go through that than feel their emotions, right? You could cut my arm off. I'd take that. Just don't ask me to feel my emotions.
Yeah, it's powerful. I'm actually taking a science course right now, the science behind emotions, and it's incredible when we actually stop and something happens to us, right? Or we feel the desire to go back to that addictive behavior, compulsive behavior, to actually sit there and recognize, okay, what is my body feeling right now? Because our bodies actually start to feel things before our brain does. And so we tend to react very quickly. I don't know about you guys, but if something gets me worked up, I will react right away instead of stepping back and responding. And then our brain will tell us, okay, this is how I'm feeling. We have to acknowledge that and go, okay, why am I feeling this? Because most of the time, and I think this also justified my, drinking and overeating and all this kind of stuff, was that I would get upset and I would start to make up these stories in my head. And I'm like, this is what's going on. But usually what we tell ourselves is complete lies, right? And we justify our unhealthy behaviors as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So keep going. Like on your journey here, you go into that space, right? And you spiral down and it gets really dark. And how long were you in that?
22 years. So I struggled with yo-yo dieting. Like actually, in my late 20s, I was about 40 pounds overweight. I did Weight Watchers, which is a phenomenal program, but I call it Weight Watchers for alcoholics because I would tailor everything to meet my needs. Like I would have 2 bags of popcorn a day, a bunch of Diet Cokes, diet pills. I would go into a veggie patty, 7 oven baked fries. Like, I'd literally count this out. So I could have anywhere from 8 to 18 beers per night. And I lost 35 pounds that way, right? But again, I felt like I didn't fit in. I thought I had to be thin, in order to be loved. And I went through a very abusive relationship. It was very emotionally abusive on both ends, not just his, but mine. And when I tried to leave, it ended up in an assault. I was very suicidal for 2 months. I was just using hard drugs and drinking every night to try and hope that I didn't wake up one day. And after that period ended, I think that was probably my rock bottom, if you were to call it, because I believe our bottom is when we stop digging. It's not a comparative level where it's like, well, if you haven't hit this bottom, you haven't hit bottom yet. It's when we stop digging. But I went and got married, right? I thought, well, what's the thing? What would society have me do? I'm like, well, I'm going to get married. I'm going to get an animal. I'm going to get a condo and a car. But I got even more depressed, and I put myself through a very unhealthy marriage as well. He was great, but he was an alcoholic. And I just got really depressed again. I got extremely suicidal, and my actual bottom was sitting on the floor with a bottle of pills in my hand. I had a little pug. His name was Rudy. He just kind of looked up at me, and call it divine intervention, but something in that moment, as I was thinking, I don't belong in this world. I don't want to exist anymore.
Wow. Yeah.
It was like, just give it one more chance. Like, you were here for a purpose. And that took 22 years from when I started to when I stopped.
I so appreciate you sharing this, because people can go unconscious for a long time. And then when they come into consciousness around it, what happens is they feel so much shame and guilt, they actually go back into the cave, right? It's so painful to come out and realize, wow, I've been unconscious 22 years. That's a long time. That's a lot of life, right? Like, when you say give it one more shot, I wanted to write that down here. You give it one more shot. Part of giving it one more shot is recognizing, wow, I was unconscious and a lot of things happened in that unconsciousness, and now I've got to clean that up, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there is some cleaning up, right?
There was. Yeah. I've been cleaning up for 9 years now.
Yeah, so. Wow. Yeah. And I'd imagine that has been challenging and fulfilling all at the same time, right? Your confidence and.
It has. That first year, it was funny because I didn't start off initially with saying I'm going to get sober. I was 215 pounds. I was about $75,000 in debt. My marriage was on the rocks. And I'm like, I'm going to lose weight. That is going to fix everything. If I change the way I look on the outside, it will heal the pain that I feel on the inside. And so I actually hired a personal trainer. And little did I know that trainer, we actually went to high school together. We were in gymnastics. We were terrible. Like, I still can't even do a cartwheel today. But, we created this bond at that point, because she's like, yeah, I remember you from high school. We were terrible at gymnastics.
I think of Hot Rod. Have you seen the movie Hot Rod?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like Evel Knievel.
Yeah. I'm not very flexible. I can hurt myself very easy, but I started on this journey again, different aspects of addiction. I worked out 7 days a week. I wanted that gold star. And, I actually quit drinking in June of 2012. So it's coming up here almost on 9 years. But I would log all my food. On the weekends, I'm like, what am I going to do about this drinking thing? And so I would actually have 9 beers for the whole weekend. I'd have 3 Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I would drink half a bottle of NyQuil to go to bed so I could pass out. And on Monday, when I had to report back to my trainer, I'm like, I only had 9 beers this weekend. And, as our friendship grew, she finally planted the seed and just said, hey, I'm in recovery. If you, ever feel like you want to give up drinking, I'm like, I don't need that. Like, I'm not homeless. I'm not drinking, vodka out of a brown paper bag. Like, I don't have a problem. But I did have one final last bender weekend with my now ex-husband, and I knew I needed help, because if I was in a, situation where I didn't have full control over my time, like I didn't have everything full, I went right off the rails again, and it was a blackout weekend. And so that began the process of really building, like owning my life and going, this is my fault. This is nobody's fault but my own. and starting to clean up the damage. And like I said, it's ongoing.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's to have a friend do that for you and say, I'm in recovery. And I like the phrase in recovery because it's never ending. Like you're still in recovery, and it's 9 years since you stopped drinking, but you're still in recovery. And that may be a lifelong thing. And, you know, I read the other day in Untangling Anxiety. There's a book called Untangling Anxiety. And he talks about the addiction to anxiety, like as an addiction, because the symptoms of it and the behaviors of it show up just like they would in an alcoholic or somebody that's doing drugs. And we're in recovery because that addictive behavior is still present, but you learn to manage it, right? You learn to go to life with that being present, and you're still able to go out there and create things. Like what an incredible journey to realize that you may be for the rest of your life in recovery. Is that accurate?
I would say so. I'm really, since I wrote my second book, Beyond Recovery, the things that I have to do every single day, I have to keep consistent, because if I step away from my support network, if I give up my morning routine, if I stop doing the things that got me sober in the first place, I could very well slip back. And I would say complacency is a massive factor in that, and you're always working to recover from something.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. That resonates with me. And I think that's that way with anything, with anxiety in particular. For me, I have those specific strategies in place. And if I slip from those things, though, if I slip from my journaling or slip from my morning meditations, then I will slowly slip back out of that too, and back into some anxious thoughts. And we have to, it's about keeping those strategies and everything in place every single day to keep you on track.
Is it exhausting being vigilant?
It can be. I think it's exhausting being vigilant when you overbook your time and you don't look at self-care, because self-care is a huge part of recovery.
So I'm going to write that down, because vigilance can be exhausting when you don't have self-care. Can you speak a little more to that?
Absolutely. I've been addicted to pretty much anything one could be addicted to. I mean, you give me a gummy bear and I'm off to the races.
Okay.
Guilty.
Yeah, anything. Pizza every day if you let me.
Yeah.
But routine was really important for me.
That's an example that small things can make big impacts, right?
Oh,
it's on a negative plane, right?
Jeez.
Yeah.
Those little things. It's like, it's the trigger, right? And I think not enough people take the time to do self-assessments about themselves. Like, what are their patterns? What triggers them? What brings them joy in life? And I think consistency, doing what I love, and I'm big on helping people discover their purpose, because, when I was in recovery, I got complacent for a long time, and the voices in my head always told me, who are you to do this stuff? Who are you to write a book? Who are you to be an entrepreneur? I watched everybody else create the lives that they wanted, but I didn't. And so I just started picking up these daily habits and going, okay, well, I'm going to take one step every day towards my goal. And instead of focusing on the end result, I'm going to focus, what can I do today to bring me closer tomorrow to the life that I want to live, that big vision. And those are the routines that I have developed and continued to re-implement, right? I re-look at them and go, okay, what do I love doing? I'm going to do more of that, that's really kept me focused.
And your vision, did you have a clear vision of what you wanted on the other side of all of this, beyond addiction? Did you have a clear vision of that? Not
until a couple of years ago.
Okay.
My limiting beliefs, that negative self-talk, kept telling me, who are you to do this? You have been, an alcoholic and an addict for 22 years. Who is going to take you serious? And it was finally actually starting to surround myself with people who had what I wanted and telling me, Tamar, you're a doctor's in addiction, essentially. Like, you've been through things that some people have never experienced, or maybe they're experiencing it and they need you to share that.
Yeah. Wow. You have a doctorate in addiction, right? I'm the addict doctor in a way, right? And even though there might be not be a certificate there, it's definitely relevant. I mean, so this question here, were you taught these ideas, or did you uncover them? Did you discover them?
I uncovered them.
Okay.
My parents, I think my dad gave me an incredible work ethic. He was always follow your dreams, follow your dreams.
Yeah.
But I really had to start to overcome and challenge my beliefs. That was something I never did, right? If I were to run a marathon, my head would tell me, well, okay, you're athletic, but you're not a good runner. You know, never challenging myself, going, okay, what could I do to actually run a marathon? So it was really starting to dig into my emotions, what stopped me, and then my purpose, right? And when you find your purpose and you develop that clear vision, like I have in the last couple of years,
Yeah.
you wake up every day thinking about that. Like I've actually got on my phone a picture of a white sandy beach with tropical blue water. I want to coach people from that location, wear flip-flops and shorts all year round, and just help people discover a life beyond recovery. And I wake up to that every single day.
Beautiful. So it's really, yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
So I was going to say,
Yeah.
Tamar, you mentioned your parents being there with you and kind of giving you that guidance. Was there anyone else with you during that phase that kind of like a mentor or coaches or anything like that that really helped you move forward in that journey?
I would say a lot of the people that I met in recovery were very encouraging. When I was younger, not as much because I didn't attract those people. Those aren't the people I sought, right? So I didn't hang out with any of them. But you know, when I started realizing that, okay, well, maybe if I hang out with some people that are doing what I love to do, they will teach me. And you would actually, you know, it's amazing in this, you know, online space, how many people, if you put your hand up and say, I need help, how did you get to where you are? They're so happy to share it. And they're so good to encourage you and say, hey, I could do this. Like you can do this.
Right. Yeah. So speaking of this, because you talked about beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Challenge your beliefs. Well, if you have beliefs that serve you, you might want to keep those. You might not want to challenge those. But if you have negative beliefs, you absolutely want to challenge those. And what happens, and this is my experience of it, is that when the emotions come up, the emotions are so intense. These chemicals, they're chemicals that run through your body, and they're so intense, they're designed to do a certain thing. Adrenaline is designed to shut down your body in a way. It's designed to get you ready to fight. So your brain shuts down, and all this stuff shuts down, and you can't consciously think through it. And so when the emotions are present, that's where people numb. It's not necessarily that they numb in the thinking about it, because they don't even get to the thinking part. They feel the emotions, they numb, right? And the goal is to get those emotions in check, or at least calm down enough that you can actually look at the thoughts and the beliefs that are triggering those emotions before you're even aware of them, because that emotion is triggered by the beliefs and thoughts, and then your choices are created by those beliefs and thoughts. And so as soon as you can handle those thoughts and beliefs and start to challenge those beliefs and turn them around, then the emotions handle themselves and the thoughts handle themselves. So it really goes back to that core. When you feel I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, who am I, right? That's a belief. That's where you discover your limiting beliefs. And people don't even get close to that because their emotions keep them so distant that they can't even access that. And so what we're dealing with is these really impactful emotions that people can't handle. And so they numb. And in that numbing, it brings up even more emotions and thoughts and beliefs about reaffirming beliefs about why they're not good enough. And so they stay spun up on the froth, right?
Yeah. And it's the comfort zone. A lot of people, I remember even in early recovery, when I looked at investing in personal development, for example, I'd be like, oh, I can't spend the money on that. And so I wouldn't. And I would always be like, well, I'm not ready yet, right? And we're never ready, you know? It's like if we feel like something aligns with what we want to do in our lives, it should be, and that's why I think purpose and discovering it is so impactful, is it makes it easier to make decisions. I know that if today an opportunity presents itself, if I say, okay, does it align with what I want to do in my life? Yes, I will invest in it, because everything that I've invested in has given me a return on investment in some form or another. It's made me a better person. I've, increased my knowledge. And I recently learned that when we're struggling, like we're learning something new and we're struggling with learning it, it's actually our brain's response telling us that we're learning something new. And I was very pleasantly surprised, because when I'm learning, I'm like, oh, I'm not getting this. And so I'm like, okay, this is a good thing. So when you're struggling, it's good.
Wow. So struggling is an indication that you're learning.
Yep.
Mm. And
I like
growing. I love that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. How often? So yeah, that discomfort is an incredible thing, isn't it? I mean, I could see where that would serve us. If there were a tiger present, I would hope that my body would kick in and shut me down so that I could get either fight that tiger or get out of there. Right. And what's amazing is that that has never turned off from that time back in wherever that started, in our creation or evolution or wherever it came from. It never turned off. And so now, because there's no tigers, it wants to go somewhere. So we're like, hey, why not be afraid of work? Why not be afraid of a relationship? That's a good thing. Why don't we take that on and be afraid of that?
Mm-hmm.
And then your body doesn't know any different. It's like, I'm just doing what I'm designed to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think you learn, when I started getting into this whole, like, it's only been a year since I've been in this whole entrepreneur world, and it scared me. But I learned to, a lot of us will stay, and I think this goes for addiction as well. People stay in what's comfortable, even if it's the most, like, uncomfortable feeling in the world, because in order to get from our current reality to our preferred reality, you have to move through that resistance to change. And when we find ourselves feeling a little bit uncomfortable because we're trying something new, on the other side of that discomfort, that's progress, that's growth. And we don't get that unless we get out of the, comfortable discomfort. And that was something that was big for me to realize. And I felt for the last year like I've been riding this wave of uncertainty, but really cool uncertainty. Really like, I wonder what's going to happen tomorrow if I do this, and I'm super scared.
Yeah. So you've turned it into curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing is, humans hate uncertainty. The brain hates uncertainty. So if there's a gap in anything, it's going to try and close that gap with what it knows. Mm-hmm. And if it knows that uncertainty means danger, then it's going to fill the gap with danger. And then you're going to respond from that space. Yet, like you're saying, that curiosity about the uncertainty, I mean, really, that's where all of the great inventions and discoveries have come from, is that curiosity about the unknown. And so embracing that, can you talk about embracing the uncertainty in recovery?
Oh, it's, when I first came into recovery, I remember sitting in a support group and I'm listening to people, right? I didn't want to quit drinking. I didn't think that drinking was my problem. But I'd listen to people and I'm like, well, I'm not like you. I didn't go to jail. I wasn't homeless. I wasn't, any of this stuff. And it was this comparison. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get help, is because they think, well, I'm not like them. Right.
Yeah.
We
compare ourselves. You had this view of like what a drunk or what somebody with a problem was.
Looks like, yeah.
That's totally not me.
Interesting to me.
Yeah, you compare and it stops people from getting help. And now I've totally forgot the original question you asked.
Well, so curiosity in recovery.
Oh, yes. And so I had actually, really amazing mentors and people in my life that were like, Tamar, start listening to what you have in common. Listen to the emotions that people face, right? The fears that they have, what they went through. And so instead of looking at people and saying, I'm not like you, I would actually be silent and start to listen. And I would go, okay, well, they have the same triggers I do. Yeah. When they drank, it was for the same reason. Once they started, they couldn't stop. It doesn't matter what the end outcome was of that.
Yeah.
The fact is that I had the same behaviors as all of those people in the room. And being open-minded to change, because I think going back to beliefs again, we get so hung up on our beliefs and our opinions that we don't take the time to go, maybe they are right. Maybe what they're saying has some validity to it. Like maybe I should become more open-minded and learn what they've done. And I think you have to in order to grow, because we're so stuck in our ways sometimes that we're like, nope, because I remember, when I was introduced to a higher power concept, I'm like, why on earth would I believe in a God? Because like I didn't grow up religious. He wasn't there for me, obviously, when I was in addiction. But then I thought, wait a minute, something had to be looking out for me, because if there wasn't, I wouldn't be alive, because there are so many times in my addiction that I should have died and I didn't. And so I became open-minded to, maybe I don't have to run the world, because I really thought I'm the general manager of the universe and people are just not doing as I want them to do, right? I was trying to run it all, and that's a really hard job, by the way.
What a vision right there. There's a book right there. General manager of the universe, right? Like, I don't have to be that, right? Like, maybe I don't have to be the general manager of the universe and figure out how all this works and control it and try and dictate how this all turns out. Maybe there's something else at play. And I can hear often something that can really get in the way of people's growth, their own growth, because it is only a personal journey, only always. We do support each other, but that growth, like you said, there's nothing that can be done until you step up and start doing it for yourself, right? But what can get in the way is this idea that, well, I don't believe in a God or universe or source or any of that. Or on the flip side, I only believe in God or source or universe. And then because of that, I can only see it this one way. And because it doesn't fit in that box, I'm not going to even look at it. Well, you said God, I can't even, I'm hanging up right now, right? I had somebody post the other day, they put a comment and says, this show, I don't get this show because God is the only way, right? And it didn't mention anything about God. So how can it be the truth or any kind of truth? Because it didn't mention that. And I would look at that and think, man, that might have gotten in the way of you being able to learn something here, right?
Yeah.
And somebody on the flip side saying, well, you mentioned God, so I can't look at this. Well, that might get in the way of you learning something here, right? And what you're offering is, go ahead. Real quick, I'll wrap it up and then I'll bring it back to you to open that up. That's it. Go ahead, Melissa. I'm done. Yeah.
No, I was just going to direct her back to how she was talking about embracing that uncertainty, because I think it's really important for all our listeners to hear that message, in that it's not just addiction to alcohol and pills. It can be in all of our lives. And I think her message, Tamar's message about embracing that uncertainty can do us well when it comes to fears, for not moving forward in a career because you're fearful, or not moving forward in a relationship because it feels different. So, I mean, we could, how many people are in an abusive relationship and they just keep going back to abusive relationships because it feels good, right? And it feels where they've always been, right? And as soon as they step into a so-called healthy relationship, it feels wrong. It's uncertain. They don't know what to do, and they move away from it. They run from it when they could have stepped into that place, right? And we do the same with fear in moving forward with our careers. And so I love the message that Tamar is giving us about stepping into that and embracing that uncertainty, because it really is all encompassing through all aspects of our life.
I want to hit on that, the familiarity of it. Right? It may not feel good, but it's familiar. Yeah. And the word familiar means like family. And, you know, it's like coming home to this thing that you know, and because you know it, you can create comfort in the discomfort. And just because it's familiar, because you don't want to venture out and get curious about the unknown. Or those emotions come up and you numb, and you don't have a chance to even dive into the unknown because you've numbed out. So you didn't even, you've tried to shut off the emotions so much that you can't even dive into that curiosity, right?
Yeah. And I think the interesting part is that a lot of people don't do things for themselves, right? They think that, and I was a people pleaser. I mean, I was always trying to please everyone around me and do what they wanted me to do. And that I never really took the time to get to know who Tamar was and what I wanted. And when I discovered my purpose, and I thought, okay, what if for a second I got out of that comfortable place I was in? What if I learned something? What if I became open-minded? And what if I actually started my day doing what I loved, which is helping other people? And so I did that, because for a long time I thought, I can't do this because that makes me selfish. If I spend time doing things for me, I'm a selfish person. I'm self-centered, because I was self-centered for 22 years. But what actually happened is that because I started taking care of myself first, you know, like when you're on the airplane, when you put your own mask on and then you move over to your child's mask, I started showing up differently and better in the lives of the people I cared about, because now, you know, for when I was complacent there, I mean, I had a career, I had gotten my life back, I got a divorce, so I felt like I had a fresh start, but I felt like there's something more in me and I don't know what that was. And I was afraid to take a chance on myself because I thought, but what about all these other people that I have to make everything right? I'd already done that. I'd already cleaned up my side of the street and apologized for all that. But when I started doing what made me, like, gave me that energy to wake up in the morning, because like when I woke up at 3:30 every day when I was doing the corporate thing, but the first 3 hours of my day was following my purpose. And I wasn't miserable anymore at the end of the day, right? I would come home and I wouldn't, you know, verbally abuse my spouse because I was just not happy with what I was doing. I started sharing conversation and, oh, this exciting thing happened. So when we learn to be selfish and do what we love, it actually has an outward effect and you become other people centered as a result. It's totally seems backward, but it's massive.
That idea of beyond recovery is found in purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you have purpose, here's what I see in this is that it gives meaning. And because there's meaning, you find peace and joy in that experience. And so you don't have a desire to numb out from that. You want to fully experience that, right? When you're numbing out, you don't want to feel any of that. You don't want to experience what you're experiencing. But what could really happen for somebody is when you fully feel those emotions and you allow them to play out, sometimes, you know, really be safe. I don't want anybody to commit suicide over their emotions, because that's a possibility. Somebody could feel those emotions so intensely that they start thinking that they're not worth living. And I don't want that. But to fully feel those emotions, on the other side of that emotion is the opportunity to get back down into your beliefs and thoughts and get curious about, wow, what's possible for me here, and discover your purpose, which takes you completely out of any addiction because you don't want to numb out to that. Does that make sense?
It does. And, you know, the reason I named the book Beyond Recovery is because people in recovery, I think, get really trapped. Like, I know, you know, probably about 6 people who have passed away and relapsed this past year because of COVID and because they got complacent and they settled for a life they weren't happy with. And I've been given this gift of recovery. I truly believe that I'm here for a reason. And I discovered my purpose, which has brought me to a life outside of recovery and creating a life so good for myself that there's not a chance I want to ruin that. And that's what I want to teach people is you've made it through all this stuff. If you harness that energy that you used to feed your addiction, imagine putting it into something you love and running with that, the life that you create for yourself.
Right? It's taking that energy and then switching it and putting it into something different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that was so destructive that then can be so creative and powerful. Just flipped.
You know what I love about all of this is that the train of addiction is still running. It's still running. The track's still alive, right? But what Tamar did is that track's still there, but Tamar started building a new track called Purpose. And you made it up. Like, if we're honest about it, you made it up based on your experiences and you created it. And then it became your purpose and your meaning and your focus. And 9 years later, that train track is solid. Now, while that train of addiction is still going, there's this new train that takes you to the land called purpose, right? It's not like you just went and cut off the tracks of the old train or blew up the train, right? It was like that train was running while Tamar was building a new track. And like what you said, Ryan, the transmuting was that building of the new track, that purpose. And it was all created. There was an uncovering in it, but it was already within you in a way. But you, in deciding this is what I'm going to do, I love this. I love serving others. It created that purpose. Is that accurate?
100%. Because I'm very mindful of the fact that if I let up with what I'm doing, if I stop doing what I love, I can slip back into that. It would just take being in the wrong place at the wrong time and looking at that beer on the table because it doesn't faze me. I mean, I can be out with people who are having a couple drinks. Although most people I've come to realize I hang out with don't really drink ever. So that seems like a little bit more normal. But, if I'm looking at that beer and for 1 second I'm thinking, maybe it could be different this time, right? Maybe if I have this beer, I can stop after one. I'm very aware that that's going to lead to some table dancing and then blackout. And then, the vicious cycle will happen again. So I have the door open slightly and I glance back every once in a while. That's why I have to keep doing what I do. Yeah. But, you're right. It is creating that different path, because I always ask people, especially with weight loss, right? Weight loss is a big thing that I've been challenged with over my recovery and throughout my addiction. But I'm like, imagine, like if somebody told you can't have a drink or you can't have a beer, would you have accepted no as an answer? It's like, no, you would have done what it took to get that beer. So you got to put that into what you actually want to accomplish now.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, I can see that as a food addiction too, like sugar, right? As you were talking beer, I was thinking sugar in my own life. I could see that as, oh, maybe if I just have that one bite, then I won't eat the whole thing, right? And then you go into that slippery slope again.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden
just one gummy bear, I'm telling you.
Yeah. So, as I look at the Giant's journey, right? And I tie this into that there was this space, like in the story when I start out, and he feels small, he's lived a small life, and he's been years and years. He's got a small home and small job and small paths that are cut into the dirt, right? For 22 years, if that were Tamar was asleep for 22 years. And then her dog looks at her. It's like the looking up moment when he looks up at the Giant. Your dog looks at you and you're like, oh my God, there's got to be something else, right? And then you start to ask these expansive questions. And this is really important, these expansive questions that say, how can I shift my life? What is possible for me? What's out there in the unknown? And then you go on the path. If you look at the book where he goes out on the path and he's in the uncertain path, you embrace that. And not only did he embrace it, you climbed a giant, right? And you stood on the shoulders of other giants who were going through recovery, and you learned from them. And you might have said along the way, well, this isn't me, comparing, right? Well, I'm just a small. Who am I to do giant things? You gotta carry me along. You gotta rescue me. You could have said that. You probably did at times, but the reality is you had to grow into your own giant. And then in doing that, it was a lot of work. I mean, 9 years of laying track, 9 years with the tickets for the addiction train still in your pocket that you could jump on at any point. You worked daily and kept your purpose alive daily, so that you could fully experience that. So you didn't numb out, so you could fully be in your purpose, which is what giants do. And now look at what you're doing in the Giant's journeys. Now you're going back and you're teaching others who are stuck in that unconsciousness to wake up, to step out on their own journey and do it for themselves. And now even you're going to have other areas where you feel small, and you're going to go through that again, right? And so the journey, what I love about the Giant's journey is that it applies to addiction. It applies to creating a business. It applies to relationships. It applies to your religion. It applies to your non-religion. Like, we all go through this growth cycle of being unconscious, waking up, doing something about it, getting support where we need it, and then turning around and doing that for others. I mean, in a way, couldn't that be a purpose for all of us?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no better feeling than opening up and being vulnerable. And this is something I learned how to do in the last year, right? When I wrote my first book, it was, thank God for my therapist. She's amazing. But writing that and becoming vulnerable and actually saying, okay, you know what? I'm not ashamed of who I was, because that's not me. That has actually been the secret to giving me my purpose and allowing me to teach what I do today. But just being vulnerable and being okay with sharing what I've been through, and that I do suffer from depression. I do overwork, right? I'm addicted to what I do today. I work too much. I burn myself out. But being okay to say that out loud and take people on the journey with you, because I think that's important. We're never alone on this journey. I mean, there's always people that are willing to help you. There's always people that you can help. And you just, it just opens this world for you. Yeah.
Geez, that's awesome. That's awesome. That's inspiring. Like, yeah. I mean, you know what? And it's crazy. It goes all the way back to childhood for you. You you had a giant family in a way. And inside of that giant family, you felt small at school, experienced this thing that colored your world, was your friend for years, and then became your deepest, I guess, teacher, right? In a way, not enemy, because it became your teacher, because it really pulled you down. And 22 years later, you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh.
That brings me back into the book, Nick. It brings me back into the book when I have the thought of Remy and Rit, and how Remy says at one point in the book, he tells Rit that he was born a small, but he was born to giant parents, and he still had to become giant. And Tamar was born to giant parents, but she didn't make that leap into giant right away. It took her 22 years.
Right. Yeah.
It totally just brought me back in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the journey for everybody. When you say it is up to you, it is up to us. Nobody's coming to rescue. You know, I don't know who said that, but it doesn't matter. There's a quote that says, nobody is coming to save you. Nobody's coming to rescue you. Now, when you start to rescue yourself, then others come in to support you in that rescuing of yourself, right? And there are people. There are a lot of giants that are there and ready to lend a hand, but they won't pull you out of the mud. There's an old, I think it's a Russian fairy tale or something, where the guy Munchausen, right? Munchausen, he pulls himself out of the mud by his ponytail because he gets stuck in the mud. And the analogy or the metaphor is that that's our responsibility, is to pull ourselves out of the mud. The problem is that people feel the emotion, they go back into their numbing, and unfortunately, a lot of them take their lives before they have a chance to do that, because they don't feel that worth. And luckily, I mean, you even had the suicidal thoughts, but you were able to work through that to the point where they may still be present. You still have the depression. You still have the alcoholism, the drug addiction still within you. But 9 years later, you're still in recovery with your purpose, like you're still holding yourself out of the mud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's something you have to do all the time. I mean, it doesn't go away. I think the difference between my depression before and today is that because of the life that I've created and because of the support I have, and, you know, my dad's a big factor in that. When I told him actually that I was quitting my job, I thought, oh man, he's going to think, what are you doing? And he's like, just sat there with a proud look on his face.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Right. And he suffers from depression too. And he's admitted that recently. But I think I can go through those dark times and always see the light. You know, before I'd go into this dark hole and I'd be like, I'm never getting out of it. You know, my hole got bigger. My pity pot got way bigger. I wanted people to be like, are you okay? Are you okay? But when people actually started saying, come on, you got to pull yourself out of this. Like, you know, almost that, you know, loving slap in the face, that tough love. That's why I'm like, okay, I got to do this myself. But I can always see the light now, even when it's dark, because it is dark sometimes.
Yeah. I like that. Climb out of the pity pot, right?
I had a big pot.
Yeah.
That's why I slapped you, Nick, is because I love you.
Yeah. And you know what? I want to give you another metaphor.
Like, open-handed.
Love slaps.
I've seen that. Yeah. I've seen that. And you know, I want to go back to what Nick said about continually pulling yourself out of the mud. It is abuse. What Nick said about still pulling yourself out of the mud, I want to go back to that, because you might still be pulling yourself out of the mud, but I think like the lotus flower, you're starting to bloom in the mud. You're sitting on top of it and you're starting to bloom. And so there's a difference. Before, you're underneath the mud trying to pull yourself out, and when you get so far and when you get to the point where you are tomorrow, now you're sitting in the mud but you're blooming like the lotus flower. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And it's okay to be a little dirty. I mean, with mud, I'm talking.
I do the other.
Yeah, Nick does the other. Yeah, he'll take us there. Yeah.
No, I have to be careful. It's, you know, parents and kids might be watching the show. But yeah, I love seeing the journey in different ways, because there's so many facets to this journey that we all go on. And what is beautiful about yours is you became a giant in your own way, and it's different from mine. My way of being a giant is different from Melissa's and Ryan's, and we might have similarities, and we might travel the same path for a time, maybe forever, you know, But there's a lot of giants where we've had time together and we've enjoyed our time together, and then they move on and they do their giant thing, which is the way it should be, right? And you did it in a unique way. And I think when you get into comparison, you're like, well, I can't be a giant like Tamar, right? Or I can't be a giant like Melissa. Well, you're absolutely right. Yeah, because your version of giant is going to be different from mine. It might be a giant in relationship. It might be a giant in kindness to others. It might be a giant in being an Elon Musk of the world. I don't know. But to compare it and say it's not any more valuable than that person over there, that's not fair to you.
Yeah, we talked about this on the radio show a couple of weeks ago about how, like, if Elon Musk gets up at 3:45 in the morning and starts his routine, then just because you get up at 3:45 in the morning and do the same things as Elon Musk, you're not going to be Elon Musk.
Right.
You have to find your own routines and find your own way, right?
Right. Yeah, which is the beauty of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, what kind of bland world would it be if we were all the same giant? Like, it would be pretty bland
to talk about.
Yeah. Maureen Pisani calls it beige. I don't want my world to be beige, right?
I love that.
Worst color, right? They paint prisons beige. There's like no hope there, right? Like, put some color in the prison, and maybe the prisoners will act a little nicer, and yeah, just treat people with color. Treat life like color. There's so many different ways to do it. And there's beauty in the differences. So if you were to give us a piece of wisdom, something that would really carry somebody forward who's maybe on a similar journey, what would that be?
Oh, I would say, ask for help. If you're at a point in your life where you are doing things for other people, where you're not putting yourself first, where it's like you have to worry about all these other things. Start looking into what gets you excited to wake up in the morning, right? What motivates you? What drives you? Write a list down of the things that you've always wanted to do or that you love doing, and start doing them, right? Start investigating, what is my purpose, right? What's my calling? What am I here for? And it doesn't have to be necessarily something to get paid for.
Right.
It's what gets you excited to wake up each and every morning and do more of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Ryan, Melissa, do you have some other final thoughts here?
I'll go quick and then Melissa can go. I think it's interesting how you started drinking and found color. And that brought the color into the world. And then you shifted and now found color in so many different things throughout your life. And that's a beautiful journey. And we appreciate you spending time with us today and helping us to see a little bit into your world and be able to look into our own and say, okay, well, where are we at right now? Take a look at our journey and then figure out, in our own space, how to step forward and see that same color. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Melissa, any other thoughts?
I'll just say the same thing. Thank you for sharing your story. I think you've really, opened up our world and opened up our eyes to see that everything that you're talking about and everything that you've stepped into can serve all of us in every aspect of our lives, just not just in drugs and alcohol, and everything that we're moving towards and moving away from and out of addiction from. So thank you. You've inspired me today, and so I'm sure you've inspired lots of our viewers, and I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Any final thoughts from you, Tamar?
Thank you for having me on the show. First of all, I love these conversations. I wish people did more of this, with, like you said, Ryan, with the color thing. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about how waking up sober and getting together with friends and not having to numb that out, you actually get to experience life. So experience it, right? Spend time with the people you care about, do what you love, and it's amazing what you can see.
Yeah. You know what I love about these, after you said that, is that you wish there were more of these. And Ryan and I were having a conversation driving back from St. George yesterday about the value of coaching. And there are coaches that charge anywhere from $50 up to tens of thousands of dollars for a session like this. And here are these sessions. This is an hour of deep dive coaching, and there's no charge to it. There's no cost to it. And people are out there, well, I'm saving up so I can work with a coach. And here we're doing all this coaching right here that is valuable. Like there's a fee associated. If somebody were to call you and sit with you for an hour, there would be a fee with that. And you've given them a blessing of being coached at no cost.
Unless they want us to send them an invoice, I can email us, put it in the comments, we'll just send it on over.
Yeah.
We're good.
So really dive into this, because there's coaching in every one of these sessions from powerful people that some of them, they do charge tens of thousands of dollars to sit with them for an hour. And because they create that kind of value in the world. And so to take advantage of that as a giant and look at these videos and go back through the old ones, there's 72 videos now with yours, just in interviews, plus hundreds of tips, right, that help you become a giant, which if you were to sit with me, that would be tens of thousands of dollars that you would have paid me to sit with me. And so I hope that our giants are taking advantage of those, because that's real value right there. And Tamar, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So giants, make it a giant day. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't done that. Join us on the Tribe of Giants. Make it a giant week, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Love you too.